OMG. I just witnessed Bob fire the guy who undercut him after secretly buying his company. Talk about poetic justice. Party popper. I was merely a spectator in this entire situation, but to claim that I did not thoroughly enjoy it would be untrue. Company specialized in fencing, walls, barriers, and similar services. The company was managed by Bob, a genuinely upright individual who inherited the business from his father and successfully developed it into a significant enterprise. Bob employed Jake, who had been with company for several years. However, Bob and Jake often clashed in detrimental ways. Bob consistently perceived Jake as someone who favored shortcuts and subpar craftsmanship. Upon taking over the business from his father, Bob increased the expectations on Jake to enhance the quality of his work or risk termination. Eventually, Jake became fatigued by the stress and resigned, subsequently establishing his own fencing business called Company B. This is where I enter the narrative. I began working at a firm offering business services to small and medium-sized enterprises in the region, which included both Company A and Company B as clients. This occurred several years after the establishment of Company B. From my external perspective, Company A represented that local business that has been around for ages, providing reliable and high-quality work you can count on, though they do not operate cheaply or attempt to undercut prices. In contrast, Company B was the youthful startup that resorted to cutting corners to remain competitive, often through deceit or misleading its clientele. Then Company C entered the picture. They were constructing a production facility in the area and required walls with gates surrounding the new site. This contract was significant, and it seemed that the only two capable contenders were Company A or Company B. The value of this contract was considerable, if my memory serves me right, somewhere near 7 figures. Both Company A and Company B placed bids on the project. Company B's price was approximately 30% lower. Even though Bob explained that it was unfeasible for Company B to complete the promised work at that price point, money ultimately spoke louder, and Company B secured the contract. I recall Bob being furious. He believed Jake's actions were unethical. He welcomed fair competition, but felt Jake's method of underbidding and overpromising, relying on cost overruns for profit, was unacceptable. Bob firmly believed that a price should be honored. If he quoted a figure, he would deliver as promised, even at a loss, a principle instilled in him from his upbringing. Time passed, and Bob received a call from Company C, informing him that they had terminated Jake and his firm due to their inability to fulfill the project requirements. They asked if Bob could step in to rectify the errors. Bob agreed and successfully completed the job. This prompted Bob to consider eliminating Jake as a competitor, as he believed Jake was siphoning too much money from his profits. Bob devised a plan to buy out Jake. However, he recognized that approaching Jake directly would lead to an inevitable rejection, regardless of the offer. Thus, Bob needed to be shrewd. During one of our meetings, which had fostered a close working relationship, Bob discussed this situation with me. I suggested, "I believe there are attorneys who specialize in assisting companies with acquisitions." Bob inquired if I could recommend any. Although I couldn't, I did have a client who specialized in business law and would likely be familiar with such matters. I provided Bob with that contact information, and he expressed gratitude. Bob reached out to the lawyer and outlined his intentions. The attorney informed him that a former associate now worked for a firm specializing in mergers and acquisitions, and if Bob wanted to acquire Jake's business, he was confident that this firm could facilitate the process. Additionally, since the firm was located in a large city far removed from their small-town community, it was improbable that Jake would be aware of the situation. Bob contacted the firm, expressing his desire to purchase his rival and requesting their assistance. To keep things concise, this firm ultimately did acquire Jake's company, completely and unconditionally, handing it over to Bob. Throughout this process, Jake remained completely unaware that his former adversary was now the owner of his own business. I distinctly recall Bob describing his visit to Jake's company with immense satisfaction. He arrived with all the necessary documentation, accompanied by the attorney who had facilitated the acquisition, someone Jake recognized. Bob walked into Jake's office, much to Jake's astonishment. "Jake, hi Bob." "Bob, hello Jake, how are you?" "Jake, I'm fine. What brings you here? Bob, oh, not much. Just thought I would check on my newly acquired business. Jake, Bob, Jake, you sold your company to me. Jake, I did what? No, I didn't. I sold it to XYZ. Bob, XYZ is the law firm I hired to facilitate the transaction. I am now the owner. Jake, that's absurd. Bob, here are the documents. The lawyer, whom Jake recognized, confirmed the legitimacy of this situation. Jake, so you're my boss now? Bob, yes, so please get up. That's my chair and I would like to sit down for a moment. Jake, this is my office. Bob, this is my company, and I have determined that this office will now be mine, so I need you to vacate my chair. James reluctantly stood up. Bob, excellent. Please take a seat, Jake. Jake, thanks. Bob, Jake, I believe the first order of business today is eliminating redundancies. Jake, what do you mean by that? Bob, well, you see, Jake, when one company acquires another, there will inevitably be overlaps and redundancies. For example, 2 human resources departments, 2 secretaries, 2 accountants, and so on. Now, since it's all one company, these redundancies represent an unnecessary expenditure of resources. Jake, I see. Bob and I don't need 2 owners working in the same company. He chuckled and remarked that he wore a significant grin. Jake, it has become evident that your role is no longer necessary, and effective immediately, you are terminated. Jake, that's unacceptable. Bob, the decision is final. You are welcome to gather your personal belongings and leave the premises. What time did you arrive at work this morning? Jake, 7 a.m. Bob, great. So you've been here for 2 hours. I will ensure that payroll compensates you for those 2 hours at the agreed-upon rate outlined in the buyout agreement. Have a pleasant day. Jake, so you're just firing me? Just like that. Bob, yes, I should have done this a long time ago. Jake, what about my family? Bob, Jake, I just purchased your company from you and compensated you handsomely. You'll be all right. Now, please leave my office and my building. And that is how Bob acquired the company and terminated an employee he ought to have dismissed long before. Some background. I clearly remember the day Bob scheduled an appointment with me to discuss company beta services and negotiate a new service contract. It was the day he fired Jake. Bob was in an exceptionally good mood, one of the best I had ever seen him. After we completed our business discussions, Bob stated, PJ, you greatly assisted me in making this happen. I would like to invite you to dinner and drinks while we enjoy Monday night football together. Though I felt I had done little. I replied, Bob, I didn't do much. He insisted, oh yes, you did point me in the right direction. I responded, well, it was the least I could do. He reiterated, very well, I still wish to take you out to dinner and drinks if that is acceptable to you. Not one to refuse a free meal and drinks, I accepted. That evening, Bob and I visited a local establishment where we watched Monday Night Football, indulging in food and drinks as Bob joyfully recounted this entire ordeal. Subsequently, Bob rebranded Jake's company into a commercial-only entity and shifted the focus of his main company to residential services. Both companies continue to thrive today under the management of Bob and his son. Story 2. I quit my job with the entire staff, leaving the rink packed with 2K people. Chaos ensued and Tim lost it all. OMG. This is quite a nostalgic reflection, and it still brings joy to my heart. Additionally, I acknowledge that my writing has its flaws, so please bear with me regarding any grammatical mistakes. During my childhood, I was a frequent skater at the rink. The only times I missed being there were on the adult and LGBTQ+ nights. Calm down. It was the 1990s, and that's literally what it was called. I was present every Friday night, Saturday morning and night, as well as Sunday morning and night. In fact, I didn't even leave between the morning and evening sessions. I even attended on Tuesday nights. My dedication was serious. I immersed myself in speed skating, and although I don't want to brag, I was quite skilled and well recognized. I had been attending this particular skating rink for years and knew everyone there. One day, just before I began 7th grade, the owner approached me and asked if I would go onto the rink floor to advise some children to slow down. After I did and returned, he asked if I'd like to earn $7.50 per hour, to which I replied, "Do I get in for free as well?" He chuckled and agreed. Just like that, I landed my first job, and since I wanted to be there anyway, it was incredibly rewarding for me. Saying I loved it would be an understatement. I participated in everything except for running the snack bar. I worked as a DJ, skate counter, floor guard, janitor, hype man. You name it, and I did it. Those moments were some of the best in my life. It was immense fun, and the owner was absolutely fantastic. Plus, since we were paid in cash under the table, receiving a full envelope of money each week felt like a bonus for enjoying myself. For me, it was not just a job, it was a source of joy. It helped that many of my friends were regulars there too. A few years passed, and the owner sold the rink to another individual whom we will refer to as Tim. Tim could truly be a nightmare to work for. He altered the whole atmosphere of the place, and everyone could feel the shift. This skating rink was immensely popular and had a long history, with many people throughout the city familiar with it. My mother and aunt had skated there in their youth, which speaks volumes. Somehow, the new owner managed to establish a lucrative deal that had the rink generating an incredible amount of revenue. On Saturday nights, from 7 to 11 it was regular skating, but from around 11 until 2 or 3, it transformed into a club environment. A local hip-hop radio station partnered with the local label Swisha House and turned the place upside down during those hours. Every week, the atmosphere was electric. There were likely over 2,000 people present on average, and at $20 per person, the earnings accumulated quickly while the snack bar never ceased providing food and drinks. We were making substantial amounts of money. To top it off, we often discovered interesting items while cleaning up like cash, knives, marijuana, and jewelry. It was quite a scene. Tim appeared to have it all together, but occasionally he would lose his temper over minor issues. None of us really understood what was wrong with him, but he would explode unexpectedly and rant nonsensically. I began to reach my breaking point because we all had put in years of hard work without any problems. One night, he crossed the line. I have a strong aversion to being addressed in derogatory ways. It's a matter of respect. Even my own mother wouldn't do it, so he certainly should not have. To provide some context, I was now in 10th grade. One night, he was in a foul mood and was inexplicably taking it out on everyone. I can't recall the precise details, but he started to berate me around 11:30 p.m. Slim, Thug, and Paul Wall happened to be in the building that evening, which led to an especially crowded venue way beyond usual capacity. I'm confident we were breaking numerous fire safety regulations. He erupted and hurled every insult imaginable at me while I stood there, my anger intensifying. I had reached my limit. For years, this place had run smoothly, and everyone appreciated what we did, so he had no valid justification for his treatment of us. A plan began to form in my mind. I immediately gathered my fellow staff members, and we all agreed that enough was enough. It was time to teach him a lesson. I assembled the entire team, and we all quit on the spot, every single one of us. This meant there would be no one left to serve food, clean, assist the Swisha House representatives, or attend to any essential tasks with 2,000 to 3,000 people in the building. He was taken aback, his tone changed, and he tried to be cordial. We were not swayed. As an additional message of defiance, I called 2 other employees who weren't on duty, and they came to quit as well. Tim had already contacted them, so he assumed they were arriving to work. Not at all. We left him with a complete absence of staff on one of the busiest nights imaginable, and the situation quickly deteriorated. He couldn't find anyone to fill in, and the venue fell into chaos that evening. The officer on duty informed him that he needed to resolve the staffing issue or risk shutting down without employees. Well, he didn't manage it. The venue did close down that night, and reportedly, things spiraled out of control without staff. People began engaging in inappropriate behaviors, smoking, vandalizing the place, and so forth. Soon enough, the radio station and label took their business elsewhere, and before long, the venue shut down completely. He lost his entire investment. This was bittersweet for me, as I loved the rink, but he had ruined it. The building remains standing, and I would love to restore it to its former glory, but my finances do not allow it just yet. Perhaps one day. In summary, the new owner of the skating rink mistreated the employees, so we all decided to quit simultaneously, leaving him in a difficult situation. He lost a significant contract with a local radio station and a well-known record label, resulting in considerable financial loss. The rink closed shortly thereafter. Clarification edit to clarify some concerns. First of all, this was a skating rink, so there was no alcohol being served. I have never encountered a skating rink that sold alcohol. The club nights occurred only on Saturdays. This never happened on any other day. Yes, it was absolutely packed. When I say there were a lot of people, it is an understatement. The parking lot in front of the building was overflowing with people, as was the lot next to it, which housed a supermarket. Numerous individuals parked there to join the festivities. Patrons were allowed to enter and exit with wristbands. I know we had to manage excessive crowds because the building had 4 air conditioning systems, yet only 2 were operational. Thus, we frequently stepped outside to cool off as the heat became unbearable. That explains why customers could come and go freely. Yes, our entire team decided to quit. 3 of us lived on the same block and had been childhood friends. The others had long-standing connections, and I assure you, this owner destroyed the place, making it easy to make the decision. It had turned into a place that was no longer enjoyable to work, which ultimately affected our customers' willingness to return. One other commenter here worked with me and can confirm this. Yes, I was hired when I was about 13 or 14. Yes, I was compensated under the table. Yes, I was in middle school when I began working there and continued until the summer after 9th grade or during 10th grade. This was over 20 years ago, so I can't recall the specific dates exactly. Since 3 of us resided on the same block, getting rides was not an issue, and eventually, we all started driving. So yes, we were old enough. Yes, the local radio station and the local record label organized the shows. Underground hip-hop artists, who remain extremely popular here, were featured every Saturday, attracting massive crowds. The other Redditor mentioned here was the one I contacted around midnight, and he promptly got out of bed to come quit as well. We all went to Denny's to celebrate afterward. Story 3. Caught my GF cheating with my friend, found drugs hidden in my house. Instead of revenge, I turned him into the cops. OMG. For full transparency, this is not my personal story. It belongs to a friend of mine who resides in the United States and occurred quite some time ago. Therefore, the dialogue may not be entirely accurate. He has granted me permission to share it on Reddit. For the sake of storytelling, I will recount it as if it were my own experience. Due to the sensitive nature of this narrative, some details have been modified. Characters: myself, friend Karen, my girlfriend. She struggled with drug addiction, but had been clean for 2 years, which is significant. Later on, Jill, business owner Jake, old friend. The antagonist in this tale: I lived with my girlfriend, Karen, and my old elementary school friend, Jake, who was working as a sales representative. We resided on the outskirts of a well-known city in the United States. In my late 20s, I found myself searching for employment after the bar where I was working closed. Knowing I needed work urgently, Jake contacted me and informed me that his new girlfriend, Jill, had just acquired a motel bar with a small kitchen and was looking to hire staff. I eagerly seized this opportunity, as Karen was not currently working, bills were accumulating, and our health insurance was due. I contacted Jill and arranged a meeting at her newly acquired property to introduce myself. Jake made the introductions in person and had already informed Jill that I was a hands-on DIY person with experience in hospitality. To clarify, my father is an electrician who believes that if you can hire someone to fix something, you can likely do it yourself for less money. He has taught me a lot and continues to do so to this day. After a 30-minute conversation, Jill evaluated my skills with a few odd jobs, such as rewiring an outlet, fixing a clogged sink, and quizzing me on liquor laws. I was hired on that same day. Initially, the work was focused on preparing the property for business. Jill anticipated only minor tasks, such as painting and replacing fixtures and furniture. However, we quickly discovered that the electrical wiring was severely damaged, and the entire place required rewiring, which caused Jill considerable stress as it threatened to exceed her budget. Fortunately for Jill, my father was between contracts and offered to assist using leftover materials from previous jobs, which had already been paid for. Jill would need to cover the cost of any new supplies. As for labor costs, my father stated he was satisfied with a steak and beer on Friday nights. After 3 weeks of working with my dad, the wiring was completed, brought up to code, and done at a fraction of the expected expense. Jill and I spent 1 to 2 months painting all 15 motel rooms, the bistro, and the bar, in addition to cleaning the kitchen and cool rooms. Jake would occasionally offer to help but would leave after 20 minutes, claiming he needed to make a sale. Jill often worked late into the night, as this was her dream. I would take some furniture home to restore after hours and return it once it was finished. The business opened after 6 months, thanks to my father's assistance, and was under budget. Jill managed the operations and ran the kitchen while I worked wherever I was needed in the kitchen, at the bar, or handling maintenance. I was on a salary, second in command, and could fulfill any role. For a year, everything ran smoothly. The business was profitable, my father was enjoying his weekly steak and beer, Karen seemed content, and Jake continued as a sales representative for a pharmaceutical company. One day, I felt unwell at work, so I clocked out and headed home early. As I pulled into my driveway, aside from an upset stomach, everything seemed normal. Jake's car was there, but since he lived with us, I didn't think anything was amiss. As usual, I parked behind Jake's vehicle. This detail will become important later. Upon opening the door, I discovered Karen engaged in intimate relations with Jake on the couch. After witnessing this, Jake hastily put on his pants and exited through the back door. Karen and I argued throughout the night. She attempted to shift the blame onto me, claiming that I was never home and that I was spending too much time with Jill, who was merely my boss. I retreated to bed and told her she could sleep in Jake's bed, as she clearly found it more comfortable. I called Jill and informed her of the situation since Jake was her boyfriend. She was upset about his infidelity, but admitted she had suspected he was involved with someone else. Jill offered me a room at the motel while I figured out my next steps. The following day, I loaded my belongings into the truck. Jake's car remained where it was, as I had blocked it in. I informed Karen that she could keep the rental and the furniture. I told her I would return for my tools in a few hours and requested that she not be present. That afternoon, when I returned to gather my tools, I stumbled upon a bag I didn't recognize while searching under my workbench. Upon closer inspection, I discovered a significant quantity of small tablets. The way they were packed and concealed made me suspect they were likely ecstasy. A thorough search of the house revealed 2 additional bags and approximately $12,000 in cash. I connected the dots and realized that Jake's pharmaceutical sales job was a cover for drug dealing, and he had likely traded pills with Karen for sexual favors. My anger boiled over until I realized I now had everything I needed to retaliate. The revenge. Jake's car still hadn't moved, so I went inside and retrieved his spare keys. After slipping on a pair of gloves I found in the garage, I placed half of the cash and 1 bag of drugs in his trunk. Then I thought to myself that this wouldn't hold up, so I removed his spare tire from the wheel well and stashed the bag in there. The other 2 bags I disposed of down the storm drain in the alley behind my house. As for the $6,000, Jake had cost me a house full of furniture, just saying. I sent a message to both Jake and Karen with the typical script expressing my hurt. "I can't believe you did this. We were friends, blah blah blah. I've left. I hope you two are happy together." I then made an anonymous tip to the local police and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives about a man matching Jake's description, loading what appeared to be drugs into the trunk of a car that sounded like Jake's vehicle. And I provided a partial license plate number that corresponded with his vehicle. It didn't take long for law enforcement to find the car and locate the drugs. What I didn't anticipate was that Karen was driving the car at that moment. She was later released when they discovered she was operating the wrong car at an inconvenient time. A warrant was issued for Jake's arrest. To add insult to injury, I later learned that not only were the police pursuing Jake, but his supplier was as well, having lost a significant amount of product. Fast forward 3 months, I purchased a home and was still working with Jill. Karen was pregnant with Jake's child, and he was evading capture. I suspected she was maintaining contact with Jake as she left the district when she was 8 months pregnant. 12 months after the incident, during a night of drinking, Jill and I blurred the lines between business and pleasure and began dating. That was 10 years ago. We are now married, have 2 children, and have just opened our 3rd business. My father still enjoys his weekly steak and beer. I have heard a rumor that Jake and Karen ended up in Alaska, but I can't verify this. I do feel a twinge of guilt about it now since Jake inadvertently made it possible for me to pursue a relationship with Jill and enjoy a wonderful life. I genuinely hope he is doing well. In summary, My best friend slept with my girlfriend. Now he is being pursued by the police and drug dealers. Edit my friend clarified why his father provided such an excellent deal for the electrical work. Apparently, he had a large contract canceled due to bankruptcy after the contract had paid a significant, non-refundable deposit, which he used for supplies. Essentially, he had the materials already on hand and a few weeks suddenly free. Story 4. Accused of theft, banned from my boyfriend's home, asked his parents for an apology. They stormed over, chaos erupted, police involved. I apologize for the lengthy read. I, 18, female, and my boyfriend, 18, male, have been in a relationship for 2 years. Throughout our time together, I have experienced an inconsistent relationship with his parents, not by my choice but by theirs. I have been banned from their home on 3 distinct occasions for actions I either did not commit or simply for supporting my boyfriend. The first instance of being banned occurred after my boyfriend did not gain admission to the university on his first attempt. His parents had a breakdown over it, labeling him a failure and disappointment, among other things. The program he had applied for was one his parents had encouraged him to pursue, despite his repeated indications that he was not very interested in it. My family and I reassured him that he had the freedom to choose his own path, including the option not to attend university if that was not his desire, and that he was not obligated to follow his parents' wishes. According to my boyfriend's parents, this was seen as brainwashing him and converting him to our Scottish ways. He and his family are Polish. The second incident involved my boyfriend altering his academic focus from law to business. My parents and I supported him in this decision, which led to my being banned once again. Now, let me recount the third situation. This one is quite significant. My boyfriend's parents attended a wedding for a few nights, and upon their return, they discovered that £400 had gone missing from a total of £2,100 in cash. I was unaware of this money's existence until they noticed its absence, as it was resting on his mother's dresser in their bedroom, a place I do not enter. That evening, my boyfriend's father jumped to the conclusion that I was responsible and did not consider any other possibility, leaving it at that without ever discussing it with me in person. He possessed no evidence, merely assumptions. He then instructed my boyfriend to inform me that I was banned from their home. I found this extremely unjust since I had not taken any money from them, and I had offered multiple times to provide evidence of my innocence, albeit all my attempts were rejected. This is a significant accusation to make without proof, hence my boyfriend and I were understandably frustrated. Fast forward to my 18th birthday, my boyfriend's parents purchased a gift for me, which they offered to let me retrieve. However, I was unwilling to go over and act as if nothing had transpired. This serious allegation weighed heavily on me, and I believed I deserved at least an apology. I had no desire to provoke a confrontation, I merely wanted the situation addressed. I asked my boyfriend to send them a message expressing my feelings and indicating that if I were to visit, I would like an apology. I refrained from doing this myself since they had never approached me personally to discuss any of the previous issues, and I felt that if they were not going to involve me directly, I wouldn't engage with them directly either. They read the message, and my boyfriend was instructed to return home alone, which he did. Upon his return, he informed me that everything escalated. They started hurling insults at me and claimed that they, along with my boyfriend and his younger brother, 15, male, were the ones owed an apology for the missing money, despite none of us being accountable. My boyfriend rightfully grew very upset, left their home, and came back to mine. He then proceeded to ignore their calls and messages for the next 24 hours. The following day, I was working my first shift behind the bar at the pub restaurant where I am employed, from 6 p.m. until 1 a.m. About half an hour into my shift, I received a message indicating that my boyfriend's parents had arrived at my house. I recall thinking about how terribly this would unfold, as none of my family had a favorable view of my boyfriend's parents, though they deeply care for him. My boyfriend's father, 48, male, approached the door and instructed my mother, 53, female, to fetch my boyfriend, to which she responded, "If you want to speak to him, you should go and get him and talk to him yourself." He entered the house and began shouting for my boyfriend to get into the car. My mother insisted that it was inappropriate for him to give orders in that manner, asserting that any conversation would need to be civil. This was disregarded. Both my boyfriend's father and mother attempted to forcibly remove my boyfriend to the car while he resisted. My boyfriend's father then obtained the spare key to my boyfriend's vehicle and entered it. The car is registered in my boyfriend's name, so he is entitled to take it if he wishes. My boyfriend asked my mother to retrieve his wallet from the car as she was nearby, and she attempted to do so while my boyfriend's father was in the driver's seat. He realized what she was doing, seized her, and managed to take the wallet from her. In the process of trying to get the wallet away from her, he struck her, prompting her to hit him back with considerable force. She is a menopausal woman who has faced numerous challenges this year, making her someone not to be trifled with. This intensified the situation significantly. Nevertheless, she succeeded in recovering the wallet. Meanwhile, my boyfriend's mother, 49, female, was still attempting to force my boyfriend into the car, but he did not want to comply and continued to resist. Ultimately, they departed without my boyfriend but took his car. My younger brother, 15, male, witnessed the entire incident and, driven by adrenaline, called the police after my mother was struck. The police arrived and ended up accompanying my boyfriend back to his house so he could collect his belongings. Once inside, the police were informed by my boyfriend's parents that he could retrieve his items in English. However, when my boyfriend attempted to enter, he was told by them that he could go in but would not be allowed to exit again in Polish. My boyfriend conveyed this to the police, but they couldn't intervene since it was a civil matter rather than a criminal one. As a result, my boyfriend left empty-handed, unable to retrieve his possessions due to the lack of enforcement from the police. My boyfriend is entitled to all of his purchases, including his £1,000 computer, as well as gifts he has received according to the police. However, weeks later, he has still not received anything. Thankfully, my parents have provided him with a car, with an agreement that he will pay them back when he is able. He is currently living with my parents and has no desire to return to his own home. I want to clarify that the account of what transpired that night is based solely on what I have been told. However, I trust my family and my boyfriend enough to believe that their version of events is accurate. Now, am I in the wrong for requesting an apology? Summary: my boyfriend's parents falsely accused me of stealing their money and subsequently banned me from their home. When I sought an apology and my boyfriend defended me, they expelled him from their house and engaged in a physical altercation with my parents.